Welcome. I'm Robert Mixa, Education Fellow at Word on Fire Institute, and today I have Haley Stewart with me, who is a fellow of the Word on Fire Institute as well. Today I'm having Haley on to talk about the domestic church and what you can do to make your family home more of a domestic church. And Haley's kind of the expert on this, so I'm very delighted to have Haley on. So thank you so much, Haley, for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. I don't feel like I'm an expert on the domestic church, but I am part of a domestic church because I'm part of a family
Yeah.
and trying to cultivate that.
Well, many of your articles on the Word on Fire blog have explored the domestic church and how to make your home more like that. So I just wanted to ask you, how did you first learn about the domestic church, and all the different activities you could do to make the faith more alive in the home?
Yeah, well, I don't even know when I first heard the term domestic church. It was
Hmm.
probably from reading Catholic mom blogs. So I'm a convert. My husband and
Hmm.
I converted right after college. We had a little baby. And I read a lot of blogs because I didn't know Catholics in real life. And I was trying to figure out, what does a Catholic family look like? What do Catholics believe? And so I think that's probably why I first saw the term, talking about the family as a domestic church. And as my husband and I were starting RCIA, one of the things that really attracted us to the church was the liturgical year, these
Yeah.
traditions and feast days and different seasons that lead into each other that all together tell the story of God's love for the church and God's love for humanity. And so that was one of the things that we really loved as we were discovering the faith. But at the time, so this was 2007, 2009 maybe, um, there wasn't a lot out there as far as resources go
Yeah.
for
Still
living the
isn't that
liturgical
much.
year at home. Right. I think it is becoming definitely more of a mainstream Catholic thing, but it seems that from when Catholic families would have had these traditions that have been passed down generation to generation to now, there's kind of a two-generation gap for a lot of us, and I'm a convert, so I didn't grow up in a family that had those traditions at all. But even for cradle Catholics, I think a lot of folks feel really out of their depth with the liturgical year and feel like, well, I didn't really get that passed down. It wasn't really part
Yeah.
of our family life. So I think it is good that it's being rediscovered.
Oh yeah, and as a cradle Catholic, I didn't know anything about the liturgical year. I'd hear stories from my grandma, and I was always like, "Well, why aren't we doing that today? That sounds really beautiful." But yeah, it's like, so. What really, when you were learning about the liturgical year, um, like, did you just start incorporating that in your daily practices at home? So what did you practically do to live that out?
Yeah. So we started RCIA in the fall, like most programs. And so I remember that our first feast that we tried to celebrate was the Feast of St. Michael and the Archangels, which is at the end of
Okay.
September. And so we didn't know what to do. So we like had a book about liturgical year, but we were Googling stuff and finding different parts of the world people eat this, or this has been a tradition here. And so we found out that there's a weird legend about how on September 29th, St. Michael's Day, that Satan fell into a blackberry bush. And he was so upset about it. This was his fall from heaven. He was so upset about it that he spat on the blackberries. So you're not supposed to eat them after St. Michael's Day. Everybody eat them for the feast.
I
So
didn't
just,
even know that.
discovering these strange or fun traditions from all over the world and
Mhm.
being excited that, hey, we can have blackberries on St. Michael's Day. And a few generations back, someone was having blackberries, and a few generations behind that, someone was having blackberries. And so feeling connected, not to just our fellow Catholics around the world today, but connected to Catholics throughout time was a concept that was really exciting to us.
Oh yeah. Well, my wife is from Poland, And I kind of learned a lot of these things from my wife. Like, for example, instead of their birthday, they really celebrate their name's day. And so my wife is Magdalena, and they really go all out with that in Poland. And I was thinking that's quite beautiful because it does connect you to the generations, to the saints. And even you think about, typically we just think, oh, Christmas, Easter, but a child's memory of the faith coming out of the home, it's just, I think it's a really smart way of handing on the faith if you really live it out liturgically. So is there anything in your year right now that your kids really look forward to, like specifically this feast day? Maybe it's not like Christmas or Easter, but like, I don't know, maybe the saint of Bernard of Clairvaux, I don't know.
Let me think of what some of their favorite feasts are. They love St. Nicholas Day, so that's December 6th. We actually do our family kind of Christmas presents on December 6th instead of Christmas, just so we have maybe less gift focused day on Christmas Day. So that's a big day. St. Lucy's Day is the 13th of December, and that's my daughter's name day. And
Okay.
so it's big in Sweden, and they have like special sweet rolls. So we usually just do cinnamon rolls as an homage to that. Those are some of their favorites. And I think that what's fun about doing the liturgical year with children is that it is kind of a catechesis about the saints. They're excited about the food. And so it's a great opportunity to get out picture books about that saint and tell them the story about it and point to the globe. Here's where they lived, and then here's where they ministered. And sometimes, like St. Lucy is a perfect example. She was Italian, but then there were visions of her in Sweden. And so there was a huge devotion to her in Sweden, even though she never lived in Sweden. And so you can kind of talk about all of those things and connect all those things together as a beautiful way of catechesis. But I think even beyond feast days for the saints, going through the liturgical seasons, like the rhythm of the year,
Mhm.
it's really telling the whole Christian story, because you're starting in Advent and you're getting ready for the incarnation and kind of walking through Advent with Mary and then celebrating the incarnation, moving into Lent or Epiphany after that,
Mhm.
where the incarnation, you realize, oh, Jesus is for the whole world, not for just one people group. And then seeing Lent, preparing our hearts for Easter, going through the Passion, the Resurrection, and then going into Pentecost, the birthday of the church. It's like telling the whole story
Oh
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
church. And I think as children, you gather kind of the surface level of those things, but it's forming their imaginations and forming their understanding of their faith. And then that can get deeper as they get older. And I find that every year, and I've been Catholic for 11 years, every year going through the Christian year, I feel like I discover new things about the faith or learn to see the faith in a different way, or something jumps out at me that's never jumped out at me before. And so that's kind of a beautiful, like it's a circular thing, but it's almost, I think of it as like deepening grooves in our hearts,
It's a
kind of with
beautiful.
each year. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's special as well. The feast days are really fun, learning about the saints, but also diving into those seasons, I think is really important as well.
Yeah, I think we forget how cosmic uh, the faith is. I had to one year prepare some catechumens, and my section was to teach in the liturgical year. And I think I drew from, who was it? Uh, Father Alexander Schmemann's book, For the Life of the World. And he has such a beautiful section there on, that the kind of how time just communicates the faith. And we think, what is it, St. John the Baptist feast day is coming up soon. Um, I hope I get that right. Where
Goodness.
is
I always get his
what's
confused because he's got two feast days. He's got a
yeah. What
nativity, and then he's
is
got, and I always get mixed up which one is which.
Well, like, so we think about it too, like, he must increase, I must decrease. So, I think it's like around that time of the year. It's like, well, it's the longest day of the year. And so then, well, actually, the light is going to decrease as we await for the coming of the Messiah. And right after, if Christmas, the light then starts to grow and it comes into the darkness. And yeah, that imagery for a child is just so important to bring that into the faith. So it's not some abstract thing, but very concrete. Um, I was going to ask, with the importance of like discovering all these things and making these special dishes. Um, do you have? I know you have a cookbook as well. I were you into like cooking, or did you have to learn that as well
Well,
before you became Catholic?
my husband is the cook in the
Okay.
family.
Okay.
So tonight I'm cooking like the one of two good meals that I make. So I'm making homemade pizza tonight. My other good meal
Oh.
is shepherd's pie. But my husband is the cook of the family. So usually he cooks. And we worked on these cookbooks together because with being converts and diving into liturgical year, not knowing
Mhm.
really where to go, we kind of collected different resources and kind of wrote down what we were doing and then put them all together in a cookbook. And we really focused on what we saw that was out there didn't really work for us. A lot of it was like cakes decorated to honor a certain saint or something, which is
Mhm.
totally fine to do that. But our kids were allergic to gluten,
Oh.
and we were kind of allergic to our kids when they had sugar. So weren't like
Mhm.
eating cakes for every saint's day. And so we wanted to just be able to have a meal with our family that pointed us back to the saint or the time of year for the liturgical season. So my husband did a lot of research about different food from different parts of the world and different places where they had devotions to different saints. And we kind of compiled all that together with some introductions to the saints and their lives and introductions to different seasons of the Christian year. So that's something that we enjoyed doing together. And my husband loves cooking and finds joy finds joy in doing that. But one of the things that I always try to tell people when talking about the liturgical year is that it's a gift to us from the church. I
Mhm.
think a lot of times people feel pressured, or here's just one more thing to add to my full plate. I have to cook all these meals for the different saints.
Yeah.
And instead of seeing it that way, seeing that the liturgical year is a gift from the church to us and it's a beautiful thing. And there's traditions from all over the world for different saints and different seasons, but there's not a checklist that we have to check off in order to be like a good Catholic family, quote unquote.
Mhm.
Um, I am not big into cooking, but I love reading picture books with my kids. And so I've acquired a lot of books about the saints. And on their feast day, we'll sit down and we'll read it together. And that's what I like to do because it's how I'm wired.
Mhm.
And my husband likes to cook. That's how he's wired. And so kind of using these God-given talents and passions to cultivate the domestic church, I think is really important. And not feeling like, well, I have to do it this way because someone on Instagram was doing it this way, or I have to do
Yeah.
it this way because this really nice family at my parish does it this way and they seem really holy, so we have to celebrate this the same way they do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think just taking that pressure off and remembering this is a gift to us to lean on and learn from. This is a
Mhm.
gift from the church. It's not one more thing to add to our full plates and stress us out. If we're feeling stressed out by the liturgical year, we probably need to take a step back and see what we're doing wrong here.
Yeah, I think too often you see people thinking that the domestic church is something that you do, but it's something that you are as baptized. And yeah, that can, no matter, you know, what you do, the grace of the Holy Spirit, it's there. And yeah, but it's just really neat to see how you've incorporated these things using your own natural interests and forming the faith lives of your children. So I just wanted to kind of bring up too, because I know you're into gardening, and your husband's also makes whiskey.
Yeah, he's a stillman at a
Okay,
distillery. So
oh, that's
he's a whiskey
fascinating.
maker. His day job is making whiskey and trying whiskey and doing all kinds of things. So it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's what he does. He's also a beekeeper. I mean, he's always just been like a creative maker sort of person. Um, and he's really the main gardener, and I am just mostly the eater. I enjoy
Nice.
watching all of his vegetables grow and then
That's
eating them. But it's really something we do. We include the kids in. We'll let
mhm.
them look through the seed catalogs before we order seeds for the year and let them pick out different things they're excited to grow and work on that as a family, and enjoy the work together. But also I think it's cultivating an appreciation and a wonder of God's creation. That's
Mhm.
something that we really want to cultivate in our children's hearts. There's something about just digging in the dirt and watching things grow and then harvesting them that really, I think, forms the child's understanding of their relationship to God's creation. And that's an important thing as well.
Yeah. I was thinking that today in the household, because what you're doing is really fascinating, and there's growing interest in the crafts, learning how to garden again. I think maybe it's people in our generation who, I mean, I didn't grow up that way. Our households were mainly kind of passive consumption. Whereas, this interest in like getting involved and making your own things, I think is returning for the good. And so, yeah, I encourage everybody to look at what you guys are doing because that's fascinating. I found a book myself. I have to actually get a house, but I have all these plans and doing keeping bees and eventually making whiskey. But I was going to ask, do you guys have any? I mean, I know you have little kids, but maybe you and your husband, do you have particular liquors on different feast days throughout the year? Because I know in Germany they have wines for particular feast days, and I always thought, oh, that's beautiful that you have a particular wine for this specific saint's day.
That is very cool. We usually do have a gin and pomegranate seed drink for Epiphany. And I'm trying to remember what tradition that comes from for the Three Kings. And now I'm not even able to remember. Or no, that's no, I can't remember. However, who would know is Michael Full, written a series of books that are delightful called Drinking with the Saints.
Oh,
And
cool.
they're all about the liturgical year and introduction to different saints. There's three different ones, and there's recipes of cocktails for different feast days, or different traditional wines or traditional beers for different days in the liturgical year. And it is delightful. I met someone at a conference who said, my spouse isn't even Catholic, but she got my Drinking with the Saints book, and she was so fascinated by it that she read about every single saint in the whole book. Um, so
That's a great
that's
way in.
that's a great resource for that.
Yeah. Well, great. And kind of coming to a close, do you have any practical advice? I know a lot of parents struggle with getting their kids to pray together as a family. Do you have any practical advice for parents on how to do that well? Um,
Sure. Um, so I think this is one of those things that you have to lean into. What season of life are we in? And
mhm.
constantly be kind of like, okay, well, maybe this isn't the season for that, but maybe we can pull this off, and be willing to kind of go with the flow there. For us, doing a family rosary is something that we've kind of worked up to, but at this point, our kids are able to do and enjoy doing. So our kind of daily life of prayer in the morning at the breakfast table, my husband will read the daily mass readings, especially if we're not going to be able to go to daily mass, like when you're in the middle of a pandemic or something.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
reading the daily mass readings and talking about the scripture at the breakfast table. And then on a good day, we'll stop at noon to pray the Angelus as kind of like the
Mm.
centering the day in the middle, usually the morning offering at the breakfast table too, and then center the middle of the day in the Angelus, and then do a family rosary at bedtime. And that's something that it's hard to get kids to the point where they can really sit and pray a whole rosary. So I think you have to just be fine with doing a decade for a while and kind of move up. But my best practical advice is to teach your kids while you're on road trips and everyone's in a car seat, because then they can't run away or hit a
Yeah.
sibling with their rosary in the face or any of those things. It just seems to work. So that's how we got all of our kids really ready to pray a rosary. And now it is more like second nature for them. It's not a battle. But if it feels like a battle, you're not doing it wrong. That is the way it feels for a while. So I just want to encourage, people, especially when you have all little ones and no one's old enough to lead a decade. So now all of our big kids are old enough to lead decades, but now they argue about who gets to lead which decades, because for some reason, certain decades are way more popular than other decades. So they'll find a way to argue and bicker regardless. But I think that has been a blessing in our life to be able to make that a family habit.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. Yeah, I have a hard time saying a decade myself, so I can imagine what it's like for the kids. But I just want to thank you so much for coming on, Haley. And I want everybody to go look at Haley's articles on the Word on Fire blog, and also your website. Your website is
It's called carrotsformichaelmas.com.
okay.
So Michaelmas is spelled like the name Michael, M-A-S.
Mhm.
It's the feast of Saint Michael. So
Okay.
carrotsformichaelmas.com.
Great. And you also, I read the scripts for your upcoming course for the Institute, and it's excellent. So everybody be sure to check that out. So thank you for coming on, Haley, and I hope everybody's safe with the COVID-19 and have a great summer.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much. Take care.
you too.